Welcome back, listeners. I am your host, Cindy Allen. We are happy to have you here for yet another interesting episode of Interactions for Change in Education. Here we discuss and combine our views, analysis, thoughts, and ideas on some of the long-standing problems and challenges we have been facing and continue to face in our education system. Today we will be discussing poor literacy and its effect on academic performance and sense of belonging in our schools. As usual, we have our pool of panelists or teachers who sit at the center of it all to spearhead our discussion. I'll allow them to introduce themselves at this point.
Good evening to all listeners. I am Mrs. Adela Gad James, foreign language teacher for 11 years.
Hi, I'm Kathy Barrimon, music teacher for past 3 years.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Blake, physical education teacher for 5 years.
Hi, I'm Judith Balkisoon, and I'm a maths teacher for the past 7 years.
All right, welcome. Okay, let's begin. Let's start with the question. What is literacy? And how does it link to the concept of belonging within the school environment?
All right, so allow me to jump in here, Ms. Allen. Now, looking beyond the traditional concept of literacy as a set of reading, writing, and counting skills, according to UNESCO, literacy is now understood as a means of identification, understanding, interpretation, creation, and communication in an increasingly digital, text-mediated, information-rich, and fast-changing world. Therefore, illiteracy means that the absence of these skills renders our young people unable to properly function and contribute to their communities, societies, and enjoy a high quality of life, thus hindering their sense of belonging, especially at school. Globally, at least 773 million youth and adults still cannot read and write, and 250 million children are failing to acquire basic literacy skills, resulting in the exclusion of low-literate, low-skilled youth and adults from fully participating in their communities and societies. Here in the Caribbean region, we continue to perpetuate a colonial, elitist culture of education throughout the region. There's also a severe deficiency in the availability of spaces for youth in the secondary school system, which continues to exacerbate problems such as illiteracy in the region and overall academic performance. According to the 7th edition of the World Data on Education written by UNESCO in Trinidad and Tobago at the CSEC level, there was a reported decline in pass rates in English from 64.4% in 2002 to 52.8% in 2007. Similarly, there was a decrease in math scores from 51.1% in 2002 to 41.2% in 2005. In addition, in 2005, low achievement rate was also recorded in language arts national tests, where students attained scores at or below the basic level. And is also noted annually 10 to 12% of students score 30% or less at the SCA. Furthermore, results from the International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement, or the IEA, and the Reading Literacy Survey and the Progress in International Reading Literacy Survey, PIRLS, indicated low achievement levels below the set in international average of 500 in every category. In the article, Reading for Change Performance and Engagement Across Countries, Results from PISA 2000, it has been stated that reading literacy is seen as a necessary foundation for performance in other subject areas and is a prerequisite for successful participation in most areas of adult life. And it's based on this premise that I decided to ask some students for their opinion on literacy. And one interviewee submitted a very interesting and fitting rendition of this issue. So now, Ms. Allen, let's have a listen.
Okay.
Is school a place for building potential or maintaining the status quo, where human life is only essential when grades are high or papers show? When the basics you don't know, who can you tell? Labeled a failure is now you're facing hell. Just a waste of resources. We go stand with losses. It's cheaper to keep them in a shell. But learning to conform to society's taste and norm, is that education? Is that education? The same things that kept us strong don't challenge, just carry on. Is that education we want for our children? Yeah, the weaker voice don't have a choice. So-called education, only the bright and strong could belong. So-called education, yeah, the weaker voice don't have a choice. So-called education, only the bright and strong could belong. So-called education.
All right, so an interesting calypso there from your student. Let's go straight in. Let's talk about some of the educational foundations and how it relates to this issue.
Hi, Kathleen Blake here, looking at the psychological aspect as it relates to this individual child, right? Possessing poor literacy skill can prevent the success of a child within the education system. This can affect some developmental stages of a child's life, as he or she may lack the ability to read, write, speak, listen, and communicate. In an exam, students should be able to read and understand what the question is asking of them. Critical thinking involves thinking reflectively and productively with the evaluation of evidence. Jacqueline and Martin Brooks, 2001, lament that few schools really teach students to think critically and develop a deep understanding of concepts. This seconds a question from the Calypso: is school a place for potential? If every school cater to the needs of students, then ideal cognitive development will occur, which can set the foundation for holistic literacy to be attained, and students may feel a sense of belonging. Abraham Maslow, 1954 and 1971, states that our basic needs must be satisfied before our higher needs can become motivating. According to his hierarchy, people are motivated to satisfy their need for food first, then their safety needs, which must be satisfied before the need for love, followed by esteem needs. Finally, when one reaches his or her full potential, self-actualization is achieved, which is the highest level on his hierarchy of needs theory. A student may not have the first level on Maslow's hierarchy of needs met. As a result, the child may be attending school on an empty stomach, which will affect his or her ability to focus on the teacher's lesson. If this continues for years, the child could have poor literacy, which can lead to poor academic performance. And that concludes my contribution.
Now, looking through the lens of the family point of view, and to quote the Calypsonian, it is cheaper to keep them in a shell. The effect from this is correlated to health and family life education. As we explore, the low socioeconomic status of a family can be a contributor to poor literacy, which in turn affects academic performance, whether it be positive or negative. It is postulated that the better family social status, the greater importance is placed on education. Many students may come from single income families, and the family may not be able to provide the basic educational tools needed to assist the children in their literacy due to the fact that the basic amenities for the family is priority and the resources needed for the students just cannot be met. Though the school provides some of the resources that a student need, there are those resources that the family has to provide so the child can develop their literacy. There are the students that are gifted to cope without the resources that could not have been provided. But there are the others who need those resources for reinforcement of exercises and activities that, if not attained, they fall behind, resulting in a negative assessment report. There is also the issue of parents' understanding of the importance of education and providing their child or children with the support needed to do better. In a study which examined how family background influenced education in contemporary China, it was determined that parental education participation has a significant positive effect on children's learning behavior, according to Lion Kai 2018. Some parents can make the extra effort, even in circumstances where they themselves are illiterate, for their child or children to get the support needed to improve their literacy. They understand the hardship of being illiterate in a society that is constantly growing and the pain they experience because they have lost opportunities because of their illiteracy. There are also the parents who are just satisfied doing their minimum and surviving with the mentality hustle every day and pass on this thought process onto their children. These children then adapt this mentality to their schoolwork and do not care to get an education as it's not of importance in the culture of the family. That concludes my presentation.
All right. Well, after the family, as it relates to the functionalist perspective, after the family, educational institutions are highly significant social institutions in society. They fulfill both intended functions like socialization and unintended functions like forming social networks. One of the major intended functions in education is socialization, where students from as early as preschool are taught to practice societal roles. The French sociologist Émile Durkheim characterized schools as socialization agencies that teach children how to get along with others and prepare them for adult economic roles. Various relationships in the school setting, like principal and teacher, teacher and student, reflect measures of social control. This mirrors the structures in the labor force, such as employee to employer. In the context of literacy, a student who does not have basic literacy skills may be seen as just a bad apple in the bunch or bad investment, since they are more likely to fail examinations and less likely to be hired by the labor market. In such a system, various stakeholders, including administrators, teachers, parents, and students, may see assisting weaker students as keeping the entire class back and counterproductive to the overall success of the school. Schools may even decide to put all of the bad apples into one basket. This type of categorization of students is referred to as educational triage. If we look at this situation through the lens of a Marxist conflict or critical perspective, we will find that our school systems are sometimes designed to provide more resources to the haves and less to the have-nots. According to Bowles and Jinnett's 1976, schools are designed to encourage the legitimation of class inequality. Marxists argue that in a reality, money determines how good an education you get. How people do not realize this because schools spread the myth of meritocracy, where students have an equal chance to succeed and their grades depend on their effort and ability. But in reality, this is not so. So let's hear from Judith, and what she thinks also.
Yes. The inclusive education policy of the Ministry of Education is based on the philosophy that every child has an inherent right to education, that every child has the ability to learn, and that schools should provide for all students programs which are adapted to varying abilities. According to an article published in the Daily Express entitled Philosophy and Educational Policies, although the policies in our educational system are officially motivated by pragmatism and social reconstruction, the main theory manifested in our educational system is idealism, which may be as a result of our colonial past. Idealism is a philosophy which is teacher-centered and places high value on cognitive development and rote learning rather than vocational education. Students' level of education is restricted to the subjects on the curriculum and is measured by their performance in standardized tests. Idealism teaches students to work hard, to be disciplined, and to conform to the norms and values of society. Students who are not academically inclined are grossly undervalued and are sometimes labeled as failures. As the Calypso rightly said, with their weaker voice, they have no choice, so-called education. Social reconstructionism and progressivism are classified under the broad heading pragmatism. Unlike idealists, pragmatists believe that lessons should be student-centered and schools are viewed as a social institution rather than strictly academic. Pragmatists believe that students should not be restricted to a fixed curriculum and disapprove of teaching practices that only focus on the academically inclined. They believe students should be taught how to solve both personal and social problems, and that the curriculum should be multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary. As seen in the draft concept note of equity and quality education, the Ministry of Education has many new policies to implement, which will reflect their philosophy based on pragmatism and social reconstruction. Only then can we truly make schools more inclusive for all students, especially those with poor literacy.
Okay, so now that we've heard from all these various perspectives, how can we sum up the nature of this problem?
So listening to the other contributors talk about the Calypso, the line that really stood out to me was set examples that they can follow. And it signals to me that it is very important that as parents and guardians, that we model behaviors and attitudes toward education that will foster a sense of belonging in our children. And that sense of belonging and respect and appreciation for education will translate to their belonging in schools and their overall academic success.
Thank you.
As for me, thinking about making school a sense of belonging, as the Calypso mentioned, the mental and physical health and family life can contribute to literacy, which affects a sense of belonging in the school due to the culture and belief of the family and also the low socioeconomic status of a family. Society will be affected, and as Fie rightly said in his song, education is a must. Illiteracy is man's worst enemy.
All right.
In terms of the psychological aspect of it, and relating to the Calypso, is school a place for potential? I look at it as in terms of the school itself. Are they providing the students with the necessary resources for them to think critically, right? Which will in turn develop their cognitive skills, right? Cognitive development, as well as according to Maslow, as he speaks about the basic needs of a child, is are parents meeting the basic needs of the children? And if not, can the school recognize that parents are not meeting these basic needs, as well as the society, in order to give the student the proper literacy for that foundation, which would lead to academic performance, high academic performance.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, in terms of the society providing that kind of support, should the money that one have determine the quality of education that each child gets? And this is what the critical perspective is saying, that, we have to find a way to balance the scale. We need equity in education. That's what we need.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Right. And with respect to the role of the ministry in all of this, the philosophy of the Ministry of Education comprises of aspects of pragmatism and social reconstructionism. However, these policies need to be put into practice by meeting the needs of schools and their stakeholders for a complete reform of our education system.
Correct. We've come to the end of this discussion. I think we've covered all our bases. I hope that our listenership was happy to hear of this discussion and would continue to listen to our podcast as we speak more on education. Thank you teachers, and thank you listeners for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, most fitting way to end with our calypso. Let's go.
But learning to conform, society system norm, self-education.